Hello and welcome to the Christian Study Abroad podcast. My name is Greg Belgum, and I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here at Living and Learning International and serve as the conference chair for the Christian Study Abroad Conference. I'm joined today by two longtime friends and colleagues. Dr. David Martinez is the director of the Center for Study Abroad at George Fox University and an associate professor. I'm also joined by Anastasia Kingsley, the Associate Director of Study Abroad at Liberty University, and together they are co-editors of Further Up, the Journal of Christian Study Abroad. I'm really excited to be talking today about this journal, but before we get to there, I want to say welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
This is my second time on the podcast, I think. Second or third time.
Yes, that makes you a regular, basically a repeat guest.
I get when I get to 5. I feel like those SNL hosts when they get to like 5, the 5-timers or something. This is very exciting. I love it.
You're well on your way. Well, wonderful. Hey, you both just attended the Forum on Education Abroad's annual conference in Nashville, Tennessee, just a couple of weeks ago. So maybe before jumping into kind of the other part of our conversation we want to have, I'd love to camp there first and hear some impressions or some key takeaways from your time at the forum.
Yeah, it was great. I try to go every year. There's always there's a sense of new ideas, new things happening. You know, you don't know what you don't know. So to go to these conferences and show up at these different talks, even the talks that I'm not really sure if this is going to apply to me or not, if I'm going to get anything out of it. But you always learn something. You always walk away with little nuggets. This year, it seems like the main theme, Anastasia, you can maybe agree or disagree, but I think the main theme was like storytelling. It was like, let's get a hold of the narrative. Students, they go abroad, people, they travel. And then, there's a lot of emphasis on research, on how are we going to make a case for study abroad, but there hasn't been a whole lot on just the actual story. Like what happened to you when you were abroad? And let's recover that. One of the early talks was, I'd never heard of this, but it was, what was it? It was like 9 times 10 or something, or 10 times 9. I forget what that was. It was something like, you come back and you create a space for people to tell their story for 30 minutes. Was it 9 people for 30 minutes or something like that? I can't remember.
It was 9 people for 10 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Oh, really? For 10 minutes. Okay. 9 people for 10 minutes. Is that what it was? Something like that. But it was like, you're just going to talk for, 30 minutes sounds like a lot, but you're going to talk for 10 minutes and you're going to tell us your story and we're all going to listen. And that resonated with me too, because I think that is a powerful tool and you could utilize it a lot more.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that was the conference name, telling our story. And for me, it just really reminded me of bringing what we do as a field down to the human element, but the personal and individual element, both of our students, but also as professionals, doing what we do in this field and remembering that we all got into this field for a reason. Maybe some of us a little unknowingly or haphazardly, but what is it that brought us to this field? And for a lot of us, that's our why. Like why we're doing what we're doing relates to maybe a story of our own travels or how we got in the field. So yeah, and it just felt like a thread that was weaved throughout the conference. I mean, there's sessions on all different kinds of topics, but even just in my mind, it was something that I was thinking about when I attended different sessions, and that some different presenters were able to kind of bring into their session content, or that I was able to bring up maybe at like a roundtable discussion, just for everyone to kind of draw it back to that theme of, telling our collective story.
Yeah, and it was a thread, wasn't it? One of the talks I went to, there was like a case study, and they were talking about how they do this. Students arrive and they've been there for a week, and then they get into this little room and they talk about the experience, or they do some sort of art or something. And they had us doing kind of the same thing, the same sort of, kind of pre-trip preparing or whatever they called it. But that was the main theme. It was like, what stories do you have already after 2 weeks of being here? So that it came up consistently throughout the conference. I thought it was great.
For those who have never attended the forum or aren't even familiar with what this conference is, could one of you guys share even a little bit of the demographics of who's attending this conference? What's a little bit of the scope and kind of who's kind of the target audience?
Yeah.
Anastasia, take a run at that.
Sure. So Forum is the Forum on Education Abroad, which is basically the standard setting organization for the field of education abroad here in the US. So they do a lot of work with universities, with providers, advocacy, policy making. They actually publish what they call the standards of good practice for education abroad that's recognized by the Department of Justice. So they're a pretty well-known organization, I would say, among study abroad professionals. As far as the demographic of the conference, it kind of spans quite a wide spectrum, which I think is great. So there's a lot of people like David and I who work at the study abroad office here at a US-based university, and are working with students. But then there's also maybe you've got some senior leadership, provost type people from universities. There are quite a few providers, both with US-based staff or overseas-based staff. And then maybe you have a few random graduate students doing research, or other different types of providers. Maybe they're not a study abroad program provider, but they're providing insurance or a flight service or a travel service that still kind of relates to the field of education abroad.
Or some kind of software as well, right? Like a Teradata, those kinds of.
Right, different software. So it is quite a spectrum, but I will say it is focused in the sense that the way Forum defines education abroad is anything sending related, so sending outside of the US. So for most universities, that's going to include study abroad programs, internships, faculty-led groups, maybe for some Christian universities, some type of mission academic service trip as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there are a lot of state schools are there as well. So it can, from my perspective, a smaller liberal arts Christian university, sometimes the conversations or the scope or even the budget is not, they're not quite aligned. But I think anytime you go to a conference like this, there's so much excitement, and there's a buzz. There's like a standard. Study abroad has been around for many, many years. So there's kind of this like tradition, or this is how you do it, and semester abroad. But then there's these people come in and like, have you thought about this? And you tried that? And it's like, oh, wow, that's kind of a cool idea. Sending first year students abroad, that was unthinkable some years ago. And now it seems like a lot of different universities are doing that. So yeah, it's just a great, all these conferences, that's what you learn a lot by going to the panels, but there's so much. The forum in particular provides so much space for meeting other people as well. And these coffee connections, we're just hanging out with other study abroad professionals. So yeah, I think it's great. Didn't it start as an offshoot of NAFSA? Wasn't it? They talked about it at the forum. It was like, by the way, they're celebrating the 25 years. They started right after 9/11 as a sort of, international travel right now is going to change forever. How are we going to, get a hold of this and get ahead of it? And so I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that before going to this year's forum, but they were talking about the origins and how it got started. I thought it was great.
That's cool. Well, Anastasia, you gave a presentation at the conference. You spoke. Can you give us a little bit of an overview and kind of the thesis statement of your talk?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give maybe even a little background context. So this was only my third forum conference. And honestly, I was telling people when I got back, like, I feel like it gets better every year, at least for me, just as I continue in this field and this career. But the idea for this presentation actually started exactly a year ago at last year's forum conference in Toronto with one of my colleagues that works with an overseas provider. And we were talking about, have you ever done a presentation? And she hadn't either. And wow, this would be really cool to collaborate. And so, we put in a proposal in August. We were really surprised that it got approved. Supposedly there's a lot of people that put in sessions. So it was really, an honor to even be chosen. Our topic was bridging beliefs, working with secular and faith-based universities and institutions. And so Liberty University is a Christian faith-based institution here in the US. Her company is not a faith-based provider or company. And so, we really just wanted to talk about how, kind of partnership, details of what a partnership like that would look like. And we really wanted to bring that conversation into the forum space because, again, Forum is a national organization here in the US, again, serving colleges and universities, four-year universities, two-year colleges, community colleges, state schools, liberal arts schools. So again, quite a wide variety, but there are folks like David and myself and others from Christian institutions that are attending the forum conference. And so we really wanted to try to make that part of the conversation. Where do people, folks, providers from any kind of faith-based institution or university or provider have a space to talk about what that looks like? At a place like Forum, where probably a lot of people are not going to necessarily self-identify as faith-based, or they're not going to work at a university that self-identifies as that. But, yeah, just trying to bring that as part of the conversation and focusing on, how that impacts students as well.
Yeah, I think why I was encouraged to see your talk, I didn't attend the conference and didn't get to listen in, but having spoken with you a lot over the years, I think I was really excited for this talk to happen at the forum as we think about a little bit of the life cycle of the Christian Study Abroad Conference. We're heading into year 3. We're a couple weeks out from gathering in Florida. And I think one kind of thing we want to pay attention to with the Christian Study Abroad Conference is not to kind of silo out and do our own thing. In many ways, I think Christian higher ed can do that from time to time, and there's space for that. It's appropriate. But to continually like bridge between kind of mainstream higher education and what's happening within Christian higher ed. And so, yeah, I think some of the desire with the CSAC conference is to draw on best practices from the field broadly. But I do think there's also an opportunity to contribute into the broader field some of the conversations that are happening here. So Anastasia, I really love that. David, let's pivot a little bit. And I'd love to, as we're talking about the Christian Study Abroad Conference, we are heading into year 3, and you've participated in all 3 of the conferences so far. As someone who's kind of sat in both spaces, what is something that gets you excited about the Christian Study Abroad Conference specifically, coming on the heels of the Forum Conference?
Yeah, if the Forum is an offshoot of NAFSA, if I'm correct, I believe I am. Sort of NAFSA is kind of this big, huge organization that covers and encapsulates all kinds of different areas, including study abroad and international travel. And the Forum sees kind of a space or an area for, okay, like that's important and we can have a space here, but we also need a kind of a dedicated space that is only for international study abroad, both on the provider side and on the sending side. I think Christian Study Abroad CSAC then comes in and says, okay, the Forum is super important and we need to continue to participate in those spaces. But there's also, there's a piece that's missing in the kind of work that we do. So we end up listening in at the Forum, taking notes, learning about all kinds of new programs and so forth. But then we also have to adapt it, right? And we're going to tweak it. And there's faith formation that happens, or discipleship. There's an emphasis that's a little bit different, I would say. And so that's where CSAC comes in. And so if you can see the progression, I think there's an important space and an important place for these kinds of conversations to take the importance of study abroad, the importance of travel, and then adapt it to, like I said, faith formation. And then to do that with colleagues, with people who work at also Christian universities, big and small, Liberty being a bit on the bigger side compared to some of the other universities and colleges. We don't have very large offices. Some of us operate out of 1 or 2 people. Some people are, they wear 2 hats. A lot of people in our field are professors and they do the study abroad, right? And so to be able to collaborate, to be able to share resources, to be able to commiserate with one another as well, to lift each other up. I think it's incredible. It's a wonderful space. I've enjoyed so far the ones that I've attended to, and I'm looking forward to this one as well.
In the first year, we really were trying to uncover who.
Right, we were there. We were at your home.
We were. Yes. Year 1 at 2024 was at Liberty University. And it was a moment of like, okay, let's put out an open invitation for anybody who would say, yeah, I work at a Christian college or university, or I work in a study abroad program or at an international college, and I'm thinking about how do we integrate faith and learning within a global education context. And it was a rich gathering. And the content was a lot of, we kind of pulled some different talks together. And it was less formal, I would say, the first year. Last year, we put out a formal call for presentations and had 19 proposals come in and worked through a lot of those for the conference in 2025 at Biola. And then as that conference was wrapping up, I actually do want to make the next turn in our conversation here now and talk about this journal. Because David and Anastasia, you both had a vision to say, hey, there's some really good presentations and content being shared at Biola, but unless you're in the room, how are you going to engage in this dialogue? And so the idea of a journal came together. And so maybe, David, back to you again. Why a journal? Why this journal? And what role does a journal play in relation to an in-person conference?
Yeah, that's a great question. You missed an opportunity there to talk about the room where it happened. If you weren't in the room where it happened, I think if you look at the trajectory of sort of an academic discussion, right? You have a conference where you come and you have an idea, you're not really sure, it's not fully formed. I think a lot of people have an idea of a conference presentation where you have a fully fleshed out idea, and this is what, you know, years of research and so forth. But really, a presentation is, I have this idea, this thought. I don't know if there's any weight to it, or if there's any validity. I'm just going to throw it out there, and I'm going to receive from you, my peers, questions and, you know, suggestions, ideas for where I could take this, or where I've gone wrong, what I'm missing. And it's very invigorating, right? It can be a little scary at first, the first couple of ones that you do, but then the next step is to say, okay, I take this feedback and I'm going to write out something a bit more formal. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to think about some of the feedback that I received, and I'm going to submit it to a journal that is peer reviewed, right? Which ours is double blind peer reviewed, which means that you know, we took an article that was based on a presentation at the conference, except for one. I think we got one outside article, right? We receive it, we send it out to people in the field who are experts in the field, and they both read it and they give more feedback. And then the author receives that feedback, makes adjustments, tweaks it, and then submits it to the journal. So if you look at that trajectory itself, it's not perfect by any means, but within an academic conversation, it's incredible to be a part of this sort of ongoing desire to make improvements, continuous improvements, throughout the field. And then somebody reading this journal, right, or reading these articles could say, oh, I like this idea, I like that. Ooh, I'm not sure about that. And then they could even write a response, or they could propose a presentation. I think we're too late to propose presentations for this one, but think about CSAC 2027, right? Then you write a response, and then there's another response, and that's how you get the momentum going, flowing, right? And you move forward. So I'm super excited. Was very happy to be a part of the process. It is a lot of work. It's very time consuming, but so important to the field and to what we're trying to accomplish.
I love the way you described the relationship of how, or I should say, the life cycle of an idea and how it moves through this process, and it invites contributors. It is quite vulnerable to say, well, I'm gonna take a run at this. I'm gonna put an idea out there, and I'm gonna open myself up to feedback. But that is the whole enterprise of academia, isn't it? To see what ideas can really hold their own. It's not because of the person presenting the idea, it's because of the idea in and of itself. And so it becomes it's long, it's protracted over, you know, multiple years to have this something goes out, and then there's a response to it maybe the following year. But that exchange of ideas hopefully means that the best ideas can bubble to the surface regardless of the person putting the ideas out.
Yeah, and even receiving the feedback from reviewer number 2 is quite famous. There's all these, you know, like there's different accounts on Instagram and so forth, where reviewer number 2 is just ruthless. Tends to be the one who's like really, you can picture
it's like the Russian judge at the Olympics.
Yes. Yeah, you can see him or her in their office, you know, like, this article is terrible. Change this, change everything about you. Go back and do more studying, right? And then review number 1 typically is maybe a little bit more generous, you know. And sometimes you get two completely different sets of responses, right? That's where it's like, you could say that that's imperfect, or that there are problems with that, but I would say that's where the strength lies, because you know, I don't know if there's one perfect way of doing it, right? There's a bunch of different ways of doing it. And so when I'm reading an article, I'm reading it from my own perspective. I'm going to give you my response from my perspective, and now you have to read that from your perspective, and then decide how much of it applies to you and how much of it you need to change or adapt as you continue to work in this field. So I think it's a wonderful space, and I love being a part of it.
Anastasia, one idea that you had for this journal was to incorporate creative submissions alongside some of the academic papers. Could you share a little bit about why that was important?
Yeah, definitely. Well, full disclosure, I do want to say I was not in attendance last year at CSAC. And honestly, this was fully David's idea. I just got co-opted into the project, both a little bit by Greg and then David. But I'm really glad that I was a part of it.
And we're glad you were part of it as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So the creative submissions were also, it was David's idea, but I would say I took a little bit more autonomy, kind of fleshing out what that would look like for this journal. So yeah, I think with the creative submissions, it was another chance just to open it up to maybe more people in our field that have something to contribute, just maybe not in a strictly academic or thesis driven type way. I think all of our authors for this first volume, our 4 authors for the academic articles, are teaching faculty or have an advanced degree, which is great. They have a lot of expertise to share. But the creative submissions were a way to open it up to other professionals in the field that, yeah, maybe aren't a teaching faculty member or haven't had as much experience or have had a travel experience themselves, and even alumni, students that we have worked with, and to say, hey, maybe you wrote something while you were abroad. Maybe that was an outlet for you while you were abroad. Maybe you came back and that was a way for you to process your experience. And so we got, an interesting array of poetry, short stories, some photography, and narrowed that down to some pieces that we thought really kind of fit the theme of what we were trying to do, that there was a piece specifically about a person's travel experience. Another thing that I think is really interesting about creative writing, and I actually took some creative writing courses in college, so I've kind of done this creative writing process myself, although it was several years ago, is when you sit down to write a quote unquote creative piece, a lot of times it is for your own personal benefit or as an outlet. You're not really always thinking of, well, who's going to read this or who's my audience. And so a lot of times when you sit down and you've written a poem or you've written a short story or a memoir type piece, it is very personal and very vulnerable, almost without you even trying. And so I think it's really cool to see in the 5 written creative submissions that we included in the journal, the personal aspect, the vulnerability of each of the pieces. And again, this is really unique because it ties back to, again, even that theme at the Forum Conference of telling our story, students, some of them who are now practitioners, telling their stories. So it may seem like an interesting juxtaposition when you look at the journal or read the journal to say, oh, there's academic articles that are 10, 12, 15 pages in length and a poem. Like, how do those two things go together, or why are they even in the same space together? And maybe that format will evolve over the years if this journal continues, but I think we just wanted to kind of put it out there. And again, no matter whether it's an article or a creative piece or even a photo, for someone to read that or look at that and say, wow, I learned something new, I'm inspired, I'm encouraged, by maybe something very practical that I learned from an article, but I'm also encouraged because, oh, wow, I read this poem and I can remember my own travel experience or my experience leading a trip where I was with students where I felt the same way. So that's a lot of thoughts there, but I think that was kind of the heart.
I love that. The perspective aspect, I think, is what you're touching on, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I had mentioned a little bit with the articles, but you go through life with one perspective, like your own perspective, and that's why everybody should be reading books and poetry and short stories, because this is your one chance to enter into somebody else's perspective. And in this case, with these creative pieces, you're entering into somebody else's perspective who traveled. Right. I was struck by one of the poems, I forget, the Copenhagen and Paris, where it's like, I think of you too, and I wonder if life could be wonderful there too. I just butchered it. I'm sorry. You should read the poem because it's beautiful. But that struck me because I'm always thinking about that. This is sort of the X futures, right? The what could have been in all these places had I stayed, or even the opposite side. Like, what would have happened? What would my perspective have been like if I had never studied abroad? Right? There's the other side of it. Like, okay, Paris and Copenhagen, my life could be wonderful there, but what if I had never gone? How different would my life have been if I hadn't gone? So I love this juxtaposition, because we will declare that it is a beautiful juxtaposition of academic articles and nonfiction pieces and poetry that beautifully encapsulates this wonderful world of study abroad. Let's declare that, Anastasia.
Well, for a little bit of scope on this project, we ended up with a final manuscript, a final document that's 100 pages in length in total. There were
every single page of it.
Every single page. There were 4 academic papers, and then there were 6 authors or contributors on the creative submission side, which included poetry, 1 short story, and then some really incredible photography as well. And so
the piece I think is interesting too, because I think we're in this age now of like our smartphones, we're just like snapping shots everywhere. But to have a dedicated space for kind of a thoughtful, well-framed photo that is going to make you think about your own experience abroad, but also, as you mentioned, Anastasia, inspire you. What do you think of
Mhm.
the including the photography, Anastasia?
Yeah, I think it adds honestly just a really like beautiful design element to the journal. And I think all of the photographs were submitted by study abroad alumni, so students who had traveled. And so yeah, I love it when students are abroad and they email me or send me a photo on WhatsApp, and it just like makes my whole day to see a photo, even if their face is not in it, to know, what a good time they're having. And yeah, and I think to your point, kind of juxtaposing that against social media where it's like you're scrolling constantly and it's just you don't even remember what you've seen, but to have a beautiful color photograph in print, I think is just really striking. And yeah, it's a very unique form of art that hopefully will inspire our readers alongside all of the other types of submissions.
And will inspire all of us to take real photography and not just shots and throw them up on Instagram, right? Framing is important.
Something much less disposable. Um,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
yeah, David, could you give us a little bit of a teaser into what some of these papers are really about? So somebody says, "Hey, maybe I would pick this up, but what am I gonna engage with?" So what could you tell us a little bit about some of the academic papers?
Yeah, there were four different academic articles. There were some themes that kind of obviously there's the central theme of the Christian or faith formation abroad, sort of hopefully you see that permeating throughout the entire journal. But the first article is basically a call to think about different locations for study abroad, kind of the classic locations like Spain, Italy, and France, and so forth. And there's a case that's made by Robert Gailey, to consider the global South. He calls it, right. It's kind of the step outside, kind of the norms, and he makes a case for why this is good, just in general, but also specifically for business students, because there's an interesting future there that might be the perspective is going to be very different from maybe a more Western or European perspective on business. So I think that's an interesting call. And whether you say no, the global South, there's other considerations. At the very least, when you read these articles, and this is what I would encourage all of our readers, is there's another article on architecture education, and maybe you're not in the field of architecture, and so you think, well, I do something else entirely. This is not going to pertain to me. But each of these articles, I think, has there are snippets, there's insight, there's wisdom that you can then apply to the work that you're doing. So, for instance, global South, at the very least, consider the locations that you're sending students to, and that's I think important. Um, there's the Mary and Martha framework, or the second article by Gunderson, and this is a model that was, or sorry, not a model, a framework. And I love this one in particular because something I tell my students all the time is you don't learn from experience, you learn from reflecting on the experience. It's a quote that's attributed to
Mm-hmm.
Dewey, although I haven't found the specific quote, but I don't know. I didn't come up with that quote, right? It's attributed to Dewey. If you want to find it, let me know where, and we'll cite it correctly. But that's what this article is so intent on. It's reflect. Let's take it slow. Let's really think about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and that's what the whole the Mary and Martha framework is about. Kaiser's article. This is the architecture one, and there's one. Again, if you're not doing architecture, you should still read this article. It's so good. Gets into case study, and there's this great quote in there. I'm going to butcher it. Something to the effect of, "With ease comes comfort." No, caution. With ease comes caution. So he's got these architecture students who are there, talking about photography, just sort of snapping shots, and he cautions you, and he's like, "Hey, it's super easy to just snap a picture, right? But be careful, right? Think a little bit more deeply about what it means to just snap a picture, and what is happening to your mind, and what is happening when you just snap a shot and kind of move on." And then the last one, the impacts of service learning abroad. I mean, this is something we should all be considering. We're sending students to these communities, whether it's short-term faculty-led trips, short-term missions trips, long-term study abroad experiences. Are we really considering the impact that we're having on the communities? And so Bill Hauershi interviews people, directors and other people involved in the communities, and we get to see their perspective, right? So how valuable and important is that, right? As we continue to send students abroad. So again, an array of articles, some themes that that go through each of these articles that you'll find in common. But overall, I think each of these articles is going to provide at least food for thought and considerations for moving forward and upwards in our field.
Well, over the last handful of years, there's been this emerging ecosystem of kind of people connected within Christian higher ed, focused specifically on global education. And what I love about this journal is it's one more environment, one more kind of leg on the stool of ways to engage in this field more broadly. And so, I think as in my role, I'm finding myself sitting in this conference chair position and trying to steward this group in whatever way that I can. And um, what I love about the journal is it's one more environment to get more people to contribute. So if come and attend the conference, come and contribute to the journal. But even if you're more distant than that, pick up the journal, read an article, and maybe you're outside of this whole space. You're not even in Christian higher ed. Grab the journal and begin to understand what some of this dialogue that's happening in this space, rather than being like, oh, that's just those guys over there. And so I think it's a open invitation to engage with an enduring piece that is this journal. So
yeah, and also, another thing to consider too is, I tell my students this all the time as well. When I give you a book to read, I'm not telling you that I agree with absolutely everything in this book. I'm asking you to read it carefully, to consider, to critique it. What are the sort of missing pieces? What are they? That's what a critical reading is. And I would encourage you to read this journal critically as well. There are certain parts of each of these articles. I want to say. The Martha and Mary Gunderson's article, where he gets into the need almost, or he's asking people to travel slowly, right? And I can agree with that, but I can also see a different kind of short-term faculty trip that moves a bit quicker, right? So I think that's where the dialogue and conversation can happen. There's a great line in there too, where deep relationships are important. Oh no, sorry, this isn't the last one. I'm getting the articles mixed up. Phil Hauer's article talks about that the deep relationships can occur, but you need cultural understanding and language. And right away she says, but not always language. So that's where I think that critical piece, right? The dialogue where you're thinking, okay, deep cultural understanding is necessary for deep relationships. What if cultural understanding happens because of the cultural or because of the deep relationships, right? I think that's where I would love our readers or people who are listening to this podcast, if you pick up the journal, to engage with us. And to your point, Greg, contribute. Come join us at CSAC 2027. We're going to put another call out for volume 2, hopefully, right, Anastasia? Is it happening?
That's the plan.
Is this a teaser? Can we say this, or is that a spoiler alert?
Not a spoiler. It's live. It's happening. So yeah, by way of next steps, and just to even kind of bring some of this conversation down to what's coming next. So whenever this episode gets aired, CSAC, the conference, Christian Study Abroad Conference, is happening April 15 to 17 at Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida. And over those days, we'll be publishing or having for sale in print editions of the journal. And then the following week, we'll make available for online download a PDF version of this journal for those from a distance. And then at that same time, we'll open up I think we put about a 6-month window is our call for papers. And so we'll put out the call and do a big push in the spring for those to begin considering. So over to that 6-month window, consider and begin working on, and then manuscripts would be due later in August or October of 2026. So yeah, targeting an annual, publication then again in spring of 27. So
I would love to see many more articles and, vast array of topics and conversations.
Yes. Well, in closing, thank you both for time today. Thank you for your many, many hours that I think many will not realize the amount of time you both spent editing this piece, soliciting articles, soliciting reviewers, and working through a lot of details to bring this thing to life. And so yeah, big thank you both.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this. Thank you to our peer reviewers. To Anastasia for all of the work editing, reading through all the articles. Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. Loved it.
Yeah, it was a collective effort, but I think David and I can both say that we're proud of this. This first effort that took a year to complete, and now we have, we're going to have it soon in its final finished actual physical form. So we're really excited about that. So yeah, thanks for just giving us time and space to talk about it, Greg.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll be in touch. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.